It's Ken Harbaugh with the MeidasTouch Network. We need to talk about Graham Platner. As I am recording this, the Democratic nominee for Senate in Maine is still deliberating whether he should stay in the race after damning allegations of sexual assault surfaced. There's nothing to reflect on here. Platner needs to drop out now. I understand that the accusations against him are, as of now, just accusations, but his pattern of behavior is clear. The women who have accused him are credible. Having read their accounts, I believe them. And to those who say innocent until proven guilty, sure, that is our standard in a court of law, but it cannot be our standard for elected officials. We need a higher bar than that. As a Democrat, I do not want to see my party stoop to the level of our opponents. While the Republicans embrace someone like Ken Paxton in Texas, while they debase themselves to defend Trump against dozens of credible accusations and a conviction by a jury in the Jean Carroll case, we cannot become that ever. Platner needs to go. There's a reason he has never been on my show. I had conversations with his team about it several months ago via email and over the phone. But when I made clear that I wouldn't give him a pass, that it wouldn't be an easy interview, they declined. That was a huge red flag for me. Now we have this latest assault allegation, which is hard to read about. I cannot imagine having actually endured it as his victim did. Too many of Platner's fellow vets jumped on the bandwagon because of what they thought he represented. One who did not go all in for him was Kris Goldsmith. That probably won't surprise those of you who are familiar with Kris. He literally hunts Nazis for a living, and Kris wasn't convinced at all by Platner's professed ignorance over his Totenkopf tattoo. I asked Kris to join me today to talk about all this and what we can hopefully learn from it. Here's our conversation. Kris, it's good to have you on. When you interviewed Platner as a co-host for a podcast, you flat out called him a liar when questioning him about his tattoo. What did you see that so many others failed to see?
Yeah, what Platner has done, everything about him has been extraordinarily disappointing. And that's because in large part, there were a lot of reasons that I genuinely like the guy. And part of this will sound a little weird. I liked him because he represented a lot of the worst parts about me, about who I used to be. Now, what has gotten the most attention with Platner and his controversies was the Nazi tattoo, right? He told the world that he didn't know what a Totenkopf was until, very recently. And I told him that was a flat out lie. And the reason why I know that to be a lie is because years ago, prior to him ever running for any position whatsoever, he reached out to me as a veteran because he wanted to get involved in hunting Nazis. So I told him, I was like, if you're looking to go after the Blood Tribe, which was building a training camp in Maine, which is a neo-Nazi organization run by a Marine veteran, it's like you know what these real Nazis look like. You know what the Totenkopf is. You are lying to me if you try to say that you don't know what the Totenkopf is. And his response to that was silence. And that I took to mean he knows that he's been caught. But this is something else. The sexual assault allegations, which are not just credible, I'm going to say they're true, because I've seen enough to feel that they are true.
For the record, I believe them as well.
Yeah, it is inexcusable. It is disqualifying, and it is. The thing that's so profoundly disturbing to me about it, and I go out of my way to try not to read things like this because I have had so many women and girls in my life since I was very young confide in me about stories that sounded just like this. And it is deeply, deeply, deeply painful to me. And I don't, it's not my own trauma. But I've been through enough, and I've made the personal decision that when I see a story like this, I read the headline. I don't want to know the details because it hurts, and there's nothing I can do about it.
Hey, it's Ken. Quick break to update you on the fundraiser for the 34th Coastal Defense Brigade in Ukraine. Because of you, we beat our goal. We've already initiated the purchase of the motor upgrade for their rescue boat, and we are assessing other urgent needs to direct the remaining funds towards. I cannot thank you enough. This was the first unit-specific fundraiser we've done here, and given its overwhelming success, I think we'll do more. Thanks again. Back to the show. Can we talk about PTSD for a minute?
Yeah.
And I know it's a raw topic, but it bugs the hell out of me that veterans get a pass in a country where 90+% of PTSD survivors have no combat experience. Many, if not most of them, are women, sexual assault survivors, car accident survivors. And yet a lot of the narrative around Platner and grace and forgiveness was that he had PTSD and he's working his way through it, which, look, it can be a good excuse for not liking fireworks shows or hating Halloween. It is a terrible excuse for being a sexual predator. Yeah. Can we, I guess, demystify PTSD for folks, especially non-veterans out there?
Yeah. So I have severe post-traumatic stress disorder. And when I came home from Iraq in 2005, I had severe post-traumatic stress disorder, went undiagnosed for over a year, almost 2 years from the time that I got home. And in that time, I was doing things like getting into fights, like really, really dangerous fights, not like you see in the movies, like bar fights where somebody falls and it ends. I, in a way, am thankful that I finally lost a fight a few months after I got out of the military when I had my face broken and I almost died. And that kind of like, for the most part, ended fighting for me because it was a real brush with death. I was beaten after I was unconscious, right? That's the world that I existed in, that I drank in. And PTSD does explain things like hypervigilance and a quickness to do the fight or flight thing. It does contribute to violence for some people, and it did for me. But sexual violence is different. Sexual violence is not about fear. It is not about, in my case, my big trigger was actually seeing men get too aggressive with women. That is why I got in fights all the time. I can't explain it. I don't know what the genesis is. It's something that I've talked about with my therapists for 2 decades now. But when I saw a man put his hands on a woman or get too aggressive, it would end with me literally outside with the guy, right? That PTSD does that kind of thing. And I'm not saying this is not a good thing. I could be in jail had I ever been caught doing that stuff, right? I am lucky that, to my knowledge, no one has ever been permanently harmed because of the violence that I was involved in. But sexual violence, there's no PTSD nexus to that. Taking, like physically abusing another person in a sexual manner, that is about dominance and not about like a sense of justice like I had. It's not about a sense of fear like I also had. It's not about a lack of coping skills. It's about a misunderstanding of the autonomy and the rights and the humanity of a victim.
One of the things a society is supposed to do is impose consequences, is create guardrails and not allow that kind of behavior to go unanswered or unchecked. The community holds people accountable. And as a Democrat, I am ashamed that we let Platner get this far. But I think it's also important to point out the contrast. He is being rejected far too late, but he is not going to be a U.S. Senator. Eric Swalwell was shown the door, again, far too late. But contrast that with Ken Paxton, who is embraced by the Republican Party, by the Republican establishment, and the rank and file, much less the president himself, with dozens of credible sexual assault allegations and the standard bearer for Republican virtue. It is important for me to point that out because the consequences of this election are very much existential. They will affect the lives of you and me, and more importantly, our daughters, because there's going to be an open Supreme Court seat. There still is a difference between the parties, even though it took us far too long to recognize who Graham Platner was.
I think the greater problem here, the reason why Graham Platner is a thing, is the Democratic Party nationally has not built a bench. And that is the party, that is the fault of the Democratic Party for failing to build a bench, to making it so the only option, the only real option that Mainers ended up having was a guy who people can say was unvetted, who was unreliable, or a person who's going to definitely, either be dead or incapacitated, in the next decade or so. And it's not a fair choice to Mainers. It's not a fair choice to Americans. And it's not fair to anyone who's going to lose their civil and human rights because of the results of the eventual election. And that's what matters.
Yeah, we've got a deadline fast approaching. Obviously, it is up to Mainers to make this decision, I guess. And you know what, Kris, what we haven't done and we need to is acknowledge the incredible bravery of this woman who came forward. And she's getting a ton of heat for coming forward late, but it is a damn near impossible thing to do. I frankly don't know any men who would have done what she did. And hats off to her for having the courage to put herself out there. And anyone who's been either in that situation or close to someone who has, as you and I have, knows the risks you're taking, knows how it may come to define you for the rest of your life and how hard it is to escape from that. And she did it anyway. Just in time for Maine to wake up and make the right decision, which they have, as I understand, just a couple weeks to do. It's on you, Maine. We have to get that Senate seat away from Susan Collins, and there are very good Mainers who can represent that state, and they need to step up now for Maine and for the country.
Well, credit should also go to the women who have been supporting these victims. Sherilyn Hunt, I think it's Sherilyn Hunt, is the same attorney and advocate and social media creator who helped to organize the victims of Eric Swalwell. She has since created a nonprofit organization that is solely focused on getting abusers out of politics. And it sucks that it was Democrats, for the party and for the electoral prospects, that in that way it sucks. But it also sucks that it's 2026 and we still have to have people starting nonprofits to take down sexual predators. Like that fucking sucks. And it sucks that there are countless women who have held back their stories because they didn't think it would make a difference. They didn't think that they'd be believed, that they have been made to feel like they owe it to their abusers to stay quiet, or they feel like they owe it to America, because they feel like if they take down a Swalwell or a Platner, they're going to end up with the Susan Collins who's going to help to vote in people who are ultimately going to take away human and civil rights. Right? The amount of pressure that exists and the amount of anger and aggression and cruelty that is doled out at these primarily women, but more broadly victims of sexual violence is unconscionable. And I reading through the Politico article was tough because I just couldn't stop remembering all of the, again, girls and women who have told me these stories in the past. Like it is crushing to read because it just looks so familiar.
That was an excerpt of my conversation with Kris Goldsmith. The full-length interview is on my Substack. The link's below. Thanks.
Want to stay plugged in? Become a subscriber to our Substack at MeidasPlus.com. You'll get daily recaps from Ron Filipkowski, ad-free episodes of our podcast, and more exclusive content only available at MeidasPlus.com.